Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of FoodBiz Plus from the Food Business School of the Culinary Institute of America. I'm Kathy Joran, the director of the Food Business School, which is the graduate and executive education division of the Culinary Institute of America. Our mission at the Food Business School is to enable and empower our students to design that address the world's most pressing food systems challenges and what we also believe are its greatest business opportunities. Today, we are going to have a conversation with our guest speaker, and then please stick around for just our new Master of Professional Studies in Food Business, as well as our next in May. We will talk for about 45 minutes, and you can enter questions throughout today's conversation in the chat box at the bottom of your technical challenges. Also, please let us know in that area. All right, let's get started. Today, I'd like to welcome our guest. Colleen's going to join us here. There she is. Hi, Colleen. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'll just introduce Colleen here. Colleen McClellan is Director of Client Solutions at Datassential. She has over 18 years experience in traditional and digital marketing, strategy development, insights, and product innovation for both retail and food service markets. She's a certified sommelier and has an MBA in international business, master's in IT, and a bachelor's degree in neurobiology physiology. Prior to joining Datassential, Colleen's experience ranged from managing her own consulting firm to working for startups and a Fortune 1000 food manufacturer. Throughout her career, Colleen has worked with distributors, retailers, manufacturers, and operators to translate trends and insights into profitable actions across all food and beverage categories. Colleen is an industry expert who also speaks at our CIA Masters in Food Business degree students. And these students will be using Datassential SNAP program for research during their education program and beyond. During our conversation today, Colleen is going to discuss varying perceptions of food products and dishes served in food service settings with a focus on ingredients associated with healthy dining. Colleen will share how demographic factors such as generational and socioeconomic status impact consumers' awareness, their ability to define key terms, and what they believe they should avoid, as well as what motivates them to purchase certain foods. So, Colleen, why don't you tell us a little bit about Datassential's expertise and methodology in identifying food industry consumer insights?
I'd be happy to. For those that don't know Datassential, we are a food and beverage insight company, been around since the late 90s, and we do nothing all day but study what consumers eat and drink at home and away from home, as well as what operators, chefs, and mixologists are doing to create an interesting landscape for dining. It's a fabulous area to work. Half of our business is custom research, proprietary for clients, and the other half of our business focuses on syndicated data, things like tracking menu language over time, tracking limited time offers and consumers' interest in buying them, as well as consumers' awareness and their affinity for different ingredients, dishes, ethnic cuisines, things of that nature. So happy to be with you guys today. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. And thank you for all that Datassential does, because it really gives all of us in the industry some great insights. So let's hear a little bit about the evolution of consumer preferences in the food industry over the past several years.
Yeah, this is a good question. It comes up quite a bit. And, I think our perspective is that there really are, one, just table stakes is that as consumers age, palate preferences, of course, change. Demographically, one generation to the next, we do see their exposure to the types of foods available today versus 70 years ago is different and certainly drives and impacts preference. But I think there are two really big, macro shifts in preference. One big one, generates around the demographic shift that we've seen in ethnicity of our nation's makeup. So Generation Y or millennials versus, say, Gen Z. So millennials, for example, about 42% of them, based on U.S. Census, self-identify as multicultural. Gen Z, our youngest generation currently, right, that we're tracking, about 47% of them are self-identified multicultural. So regardless about DNA testing or actual, knowing your family tree, this is just a perspective on how they think of themselves and likely what they're exposed to cooking in the home growing up and the food exposed to them on the streets around where they live. And so what we have really seen is a shift away from this notion of authentic ethnic and the purest form of ethnic authentic foods. It's really, we've gotten to a place where today ethnic is really just American, as in if you look at restaurants to date labeled as, quote, new American cuisine, consumers are no longer shocked to go to a California pizza kitchen and see Thai calamari. What that has to do with California cuisine or pizza, no one really cares. At the end of the day, it's just delicious, amazing, craveable food. So wrapping our heads around not having to be self-identified as a restaurant that is Mexican to have a crazy burrito that's stuffed with a Philly cheesesteak, that seems odd, but just delicious. Consumers don't scratch their head any longer and go, gee, that's Korean barbecue on top of fries at a Chili's. That seems odd to me. It's more about, oh, that sounds kind of good. I'm going to try that. So big shift, I think, in consumer expectation and acceptance around internationally ethnic-based recipes with a twist. It's no longer mashup and fusion. It's just, this is new American cuisine. People have embraced it. The other really huge shift, if I think about it, is around health and wellness. We went from the 1980s Healthy 1.0, and I always joke about my Jane Fonda leg warmers and Snackwell cookie era, shifted then into Healthy 2.0, really focused on what we'd say feel-good terminology. So a shift from low-fat, no-salt labeling to natural, organic, local, sustainable, all of which very chaotic in terms of the mindset of a consumer's ability to define any of those things, but yet seemingly willing to pay more for some of them. We've now shifted today to current times Healthy 3.0, where consumers have sort of, I think, due to the chaos and the stress of labeling and understanding it, are really focusing on healthy benefits, functional benefits of food. So blueberries, almonds, these are things assumed, presumed, or perceived, somewhat scientific evidence to back things up, but certainly a lot of foods where clinical trial data just isn't yet available, but has a healthy halo. It's assumed antioxidants are going to help my memory, or this will help me sleep well. So what's interesting is that packaged goods now being able to just say contains superfoods, contains almonds, contains blueberries, just simple examples, associated as a then healthy food, even if it perhaps is a cookie bar or a snack bar, may have a lot of sugar, but ultimately consumers going, yeah, but I could have had it with chocolate, I'm having it with blueberries and almonds, therefore I am reaping functional benefits. And so I think that more simplified benefit marketing is where we are today and will continue to grow, followed very quickly by 4.0 just emerging, leveraging technology for completely personalized dietary health and well-being. So blood work, DNA related, metabolic related to the individual, hero foods, things that are highly functional for one, not necessarily for the rest of the family, which will, I think, create interesting innovation, but also challenges in the away from home dining arena. How do you cater to a million individuals, right?
Right. How do you cook at home that way, or how do you eat out that way, right?
That's right.
So much personalized nutrition as a big topic.
Mm-hmm.
So in relationship to that, do you think there are significant changes that are impacting the current environment in terms of food preferences?
Significant changes. I would say that our millennial demographic group started a real shift, and it was a lot of that was due to the timing of when they exited college looking for jobs. So the economic conditions, the job environment, loans, debt ratio, all of these things, still staying in mom and dad's basement 2-3 times, leave, come back, leave, come back. We're finally at that stage where I think majority of millennials have moved out of the basement. We are now at an era of them settling, coupling, as well as having families. So their ability to drop $8-9 on a latte, or a unicorn latte for that matter, is they spent their money on these what you might call immediate indulgences or miniature experiences that they could have throughout a day, not saving all their money for like the best furniture or a cruise. They used their money each and every day to have Instagrammable, memorable moments that they are sharing, whether live in person or online, but creating these social experiences. Now that they are in a next stage of life, their perceptions and needs are shifting in that I don't want to give up paying for experiences, but now I have a massive time crunch. I need to now feed someone else that's, under the age of 5, perhaps. And so time crunch, still wanting good experience, creates a generation of now higher demand for in-home delivery, whether it be grocery or dining restaurant. So that's a shift. And of course, that trickles into health and wellness. Gen Z, though being raised by a completely different demographic group like Xers, who were your latchkey kids, get it done, nobody rewarded me for anything other than I safely got home, didn't burn the house down, made my own snack, did my own homework. Those types of parenting now have really shifted. I think Gen Z is not going to look like millennials in what they're willing to pay for or what they desire. We already see some of that in their what they perceive to be healthy, what they're willing to pay for, and even what they can define from a healthy standpoint. Now, caveat, they're still really young, so we're monitoring for that. So when we look at large sample demographics, ethnicity, region, income, and the ability to persuade or influence your liking of food and ingredients, the two biggest factors that we see are generation and ethnicity. And a lot of that has to do with where we started this conversation, what you're exposed to young and early when your palate is developing, the diversity of foods you're exposed to, all of that tends to influence your long-term perception of what you're willing to eat. There's always those stories of, I ate peas or lima beans for the first time and they were horrific and I had to sit at the table for 10 hours and so now I'll never touch another pea again. Those are still very real and they happen across generation, but you can imagine certain ethnic cultural recipes that you grow up in the home having repeated has changed. Couple that with an entire generation of, say, early boomers to late Xers who just didn't cook, right? So they stopped passing things down. And so now your only exposure is what you see away from home, or go to soccer and you go home with someone and you eat their food. And so because of that great allowance of the diversity and the after-school programs and things that young kids are exposed to, they're certainly eating and aware of and consuming a much more diverse set of foods than boomers did at that same age. So those are probably the two biggest drivers, and I think that's a surprise. Most think income is a big driver. It's a driver perhaps of exposure, but not necessarily the ability to like or hate an ingredient, or even with the internet today, it's not seemingly huge impact on awareness or ability to define healthy ingredients.
Oh, interesting. So more generational than socioeconomic.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Good insights. Do you think there are more differences than similarities between the different populations?
I think it is topic specific. So certainly we've looked at things like dishes, ingredients. We've looked at their awareness of health perception terms like an ancient grain or gluten-free, whether that be a position or a diet choice. We've looked across all of these things, and it really is the devil's in the details. A great example, thinking ahead, was about fried foods. And would you think fried foods are healthy? And I think it's kind of funny because your instant thought is, well, the whole population would think that fried foods of any kind are not good for you. Well, about
Uh-huh.
61% of the population agree fried foods are just simply not healthy, period. However, that leaves close to 40% who are unsure or actually think they are healthy. And when you look at it, you can think of things like, and when we look deeper, like falafel, plant-based,
Mm-hmm.
made with
Mm-hmm.
high fiber ingredients like beans, but they are fried. So is that
Right.
a healthy item for you over a burger? It's fried.
Right.
Is it good because you're getting your plant-based proteins, perhaps? You're eating more legumes. So there is a population, and especially your millennials, who are more aware of a falafel as a dish in general, that allows them to think beyond onion rings and French fries for fried food. So if it's fried fish,
Mm-hmm.
is that really bad for me? How bad? How unhealthy compared to my
Mm-hmm.
choice could have been a chicken nugget? So is fried chicken better or worse than fried fish or falafel compared to onion rings and fries or fried
Mm-hmm.
cheesecake bites? So there
Mm-hmm.
is really kind of nuance here. I think that it's challenging, and I think that it's good that we have the conversation, and it's probably good that there's not a huge big broad stroke that we quickly can bucket healthy unhealthy blindly without getting into the details. So I find that actually
Right.
quite more encouraging than discouraging based on how people are like, oh my gosh, why isn't it everybody agrees that fried is bad? And it really is in the context of the individual diet day in and day out, not just a
Right.
one-time treat or a splurge or
Exactly.
doing something away from home you might not do in the home.
Exactly. And when you're thinking about an example like fried foods, do these consumers consider the breading or the type of oil that is used, or do they not get down to that kind of nitty
Well, we
gritty?
didn't ask it in this particular body of work. We did ask about olive oil, right? Just to say, would you say that that is a healthy ingredient, for example? And we
Hmm.
did ask about cold pressed juice instead of just fruit juices. And more
Hmm.
than 50% of the population agrees olive oil is good for you. Um, but I certainly would tell you I do not believe, just based on simple other terms that have been around for a very long time and the lack of ability to define them at all, including organic,
Uh-huh.
the chance that they
Uh-huh.
understand that there's any variation in oil types is like over their head. It's just not something, with the exception of perhaps the tiny group
Gotcha.
of foodies, and I mean foodies as self defined, have a passion for learning and trying new foods and beverages all the time. So it
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean you have to be educated. It means that you have a passion to seek out that information, always want to learn more about food. And it's not a
Hmm.
huge chunk of the population that agrees to that statement. So it's that group that shows a slight skew towards knowing or thinking they know a bit more about these kind of ingredients that you mentioned.
Hmm. Hmm. And what about geographically in our country? Do you see more knowledge in certain areas than others, or is it pretty well
Pretty balanced.
equally
We
spread?
do have a few things like the willingness to pay more for certain healthy descriptors. For example, natural, organic, hormone free. It does skew those willing to pay more to the Northeast. And I think most suspect that that would be West Coast, but it's actually the Northeast where we
Very
see that
interesting.
skew. Um, the Northeast tends to have some skewing in general more than any place else around paying more or even awareness um, and the ability to define, except it's still a very small population, like less than 25%, who say they could perfectly define any of those healthy terms. And even within
Hmm.
that, you see a larger skew among the generation being the millennials and boomers being the least able to define and also the least willing to ever pay more. As far as they're concerned, these are table stakes. It should just come with my food. Which I
Oh my
do
goodness.
think that has
Very.
a lot to do with being raised by the silent generation and coming off of family members that lived through the Depression, right? That they
Right.
don't
I
feel
think
the
so
need.
too.
Why should I pay more for anything, right? It should cost
Right.
what it costs. Whereas millennials
Yep.
seeing it as an
Absolutely.
experience or some level of personalization or customization, even that they say, sure, I'd be willing to pay for that as long as I can get what I want, how I want it made for me.
Right. Exactly. And so, what are the motivators for consumers to choose a healthy food product over something else that they perceive as unhealthy?
Yeah, that's a tough question, honestly. The very first thing that we notice is that food has to taste good first and foremost, and food has to be affordable. So in decades and decades of studying, I mean, truly 20 plus years in doing research with consumers and always asking motivators around food purchase, whether it's home or away from home, there are three elements that come to the top that are, in fact, four. One we've stopped asking about, which is convenience. So if we make food difficult to get, period, not going to happen, not going to get purchased. So we don't even ask anymore because it's table stakes of entry. So the top three things that tend to rotate depending on the economy are taste, flavor, right? Must hit on that.
Right.
Affordability, value for my money, and health and wellness properties. So needing to be good for me on some level. Now that definition ranges widely, but those three intermix the top spots based on economically. So if the economy is in the tank and people are unemployed, then value becomes, and then taste, and then health. When the economy is doing well, then it is taste, and then health, and then value. And these things kind of shift 1 to 3 spot on and off. So with that, we then dig a little deeper and say, well, you know, a couple of ways to think about let's call them positions like antibiotic-free, no MSG, omega-3s, plant-based, humanely raised. These are all descriptors used to tell the story of what might be determined to be a healthier dish or item. And what we've noticed is that we can ask them, are you motivated by it? Like, more likely to buy something that contains any one of these? Would you pay more for it? Are you not motivated at all? And what we know is that more than half of consumers are more likely to buy something that has the words natural in it, local, whole grain, and high protein. Ancient grain is the most unknown, unaware, people unaware of that term in total.
People don't know what it is.
Only roughly around 23% of the population are willing to pay more, and the willing to pay more is for natural, local, organic, and hormone-free. And there are about half that are not motivated at all by an ancient grain. Again, most don't even know what it is. Plant protein, vegan or vegetarian, and gluten-free. And we think that the reason those last two are in there not motivated by is because if you have to eat that way, there's a very big difference between lifestyle and, let's say, diet. I joke all the time that diet leads with the word die, and most people don't want to diet. They are not successful with it because it means suffering, and American consumers do not like to suffer, periodically, but really just not in total. So those that truly now need to live gluten-free, that's a lifestyle. That is health as in make or break illness. Same for the vegan and vegetarian. That's a set of principles typically. So people who flex their diet and occasionally eat plant-based or eat plant-based once a day or a few times a week and then enjoy a tomahawk steak on a Friday night, they're not necessarily motivated by those things. They like having choice. So they're not going to always choose something that is labeled as plant-based or plant protein or vegetarian, but they like having the option because you never know which day of the week you're, as a restaurateur, you're encountering them. So they could have had the tomahawk the night before they saw you, and today they're looking to cut back a little or return to a little bit more of a plant-forward or completely vegetarian choice once in that day to kind of, level set. And then there's a lot that consumers strive to do that, again, suffering, inconvenience, not able to really stick to permanently. So we don't see gluten-free, vegan, or vegetarian, quote, diets or even self-identifying people themselves in those terms unless they absolutely have to. So vegan, vegetarian, they're like 7% of the population. You're not going to see that jump to 40% no matter how much media is out there about what is kind of good for you. I think ultimately what you're seeing is the flexitarian, and they do not describe themselves that way. They don't walk around with that badge. I'm a flexitarian. What are you? They don't do that. But they are saying, look, I'm trying to cut back red meat. Sometimes I can do that through the blended burger, as an example, half mushroom, half beef. To me, I'm making a better choice for myself because I could have just had full beef. Or I'm doing turkey one night, I'm doing fish, then I do a bean meal, beans and grains. I don't even know that they're ancient. Doesn't matter to me. It's all part of that, me trying to shift and cut back on certain areas of my life and try to be, quote, healthier. Those diehards that have to do it, I'm allergic to lactose, they're following that truly because their lifestyle demands it. And so having options, being transparent on label anywhere, in home, out of home, helping the consumer know this is truly lacking gluten, no cross-contamination, because those who really need it are the ones flipping the packaging over and reading a menu and scouring for, do you wear gloves? You know, are you going to make my burrito bowl after having touched a burrito and, you know, cross-contamination? That's what's really, I think, hugely important right now in
Yeah.
terms of motivation.
No, we see a lot of people eating for balance and like you say, being very flexible and eating a whole variety of things, especially as people eat out often, not just for special
That's right.
occasions, right? So sometimes they're treating themselves, but sometimes they're just going out for a regular meal, and they don't
Right.
necessarily have to be indulging it every single time they go out. So is there something that chefs or food product developers can do? Do you have any thoughts about creative messaging, effective messaging when they're either menuing an item or looking at packaging and describing an item? I know you mentioned the specifics of local, organic, et cetera, but is there any other messaging that they should think about when they're talking about talking about those descriptors?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I think transparency is key in the form of a story. So if you can make an item, a menu item, or even a packaged good, find some way to communicate the story on pack as to truly what's in there. I think, and that could be whether it's letting them know that it's free from artificial flavors, if that's your gig, or no hormones added ever. Because what's happened is there's been too much noise in the marketplace for good example would be hormone use. There are specific proteins that can never have hormones and have never had hormones. However, because someone put it on their label, no hormones added, consumers go, oh my gosh, that must mean hormones are in everything else. It's not, right?
Hmm.
And so we, I think, accidentally, through our need to differentiate, have created more noise and really a lack of consistent communications about what things mean. You say cage free,
Hmm.
and every consumer who hears the word cage free envisions flocks of birds frolicking on pastures and a little red barn, and that's the whole farm, and they think that that's reasonable. They're so clueless about what truly the supply chain needs to look like. And so, you
Hmm.
know, if we said if all your birds were flocking all around and hanging out all over the pasture, you know they would majority cluster together and stand on one another because it's the nature of the breed. That bird likes to be tight quartered, and you don't want coyotes eating them all. So there is a reason why shelter is provided, and I don't think that consumers have a bit of a clue. So we try to help, well, look, ours are cage free. Well, what does that really mean, right? So I think leading benefit driven, right, where you could talk about this should aid in healthy night's sleep, or this gives you energy, or this is, you know, completely made from scratch, or this is made with only 5 simple ingredients. Transparency, food with a story, lead with flavor. Photographs, I think, are the way of the future, especially as more and more delivery programs and online menuing, that we
Right.
may get to a place where the story goes away completely and all you see is an image. And that's going to require technology that enables a consumer. Is that gluten-free? It looks gluten-free. What's in that? Right? It's
Hmm.
never going to be a substitute for words, but I do think photos will lead more and more and more. And we're already seeing young generations say they've chosen places to eat based on a food shot that was posted on Yelp or Instagram. It looked good, so
Oh, of
then we went to
course.
the
Yes.
restaurant that had that food shot. So I think that even more so is going to require us to be nimble in ways to communicate. A great example is acetic acid, citric acid. These are very household staple items. Consumers have no
Hmm.
idea what they are. We are finally just now in this last body of work we did compared to like 2016, where more consumers think those two ingredients are beneficial than harmful, just barely. They have no idea it's lemon juice or vinegar. And they will say to you, well, why didn't you just say lemon juice and vinegar? Um, Same with vitamin C. If you use its chemical name, people think, why are you putting chemicals on my apples to preserve them? And it's like, right? And so we're not doing a great job for those not close to the industry to quickly unpack, use a phone, link to a site that says, hey, this is just vinegar, right? Or, hey, this is, vitamin C. This is actually good for you. Instead, they hear the word acid and they instantly think, acid's bad. That's going to kill me. I shouldn't eat it. Especially among millennials and Zs. They're actually the worst culprits for this.
Because it's just not clear. And the same applies to menu verbiage that you just described in terms of product menu would be the same. Do you think that on menus, people are still interested in knowing the particular name of the producer of where things come from, or was that kind of more of a fad than a trend?
No, I think that that's all part of the story, to be honest. I think any time with these very handy-dandy technology savvy people, right? I mean, when Gen Z never knew a phone that you couldn't answer the call by like looking at somebody's face. So I think for them, there's nothing abnormal or atypical about quickly searching a producer, and then reading that story and getting lost in it a bit. I think a lot of this has to do with the lack of in-person human socialization that they get, that there is a romance of reading and connecting to others through food. And so I don't think it's a fad as much as it's just being transparent. Like, here's everything you ever wanted to know about what we're doing. We're not trying to keep it behind closed doors. It's why those open kitchen formats do so well. People feel like, oh, it must be fresher because I can see it. I don't know what they dream up is going on behind the doors, but there's certainly a level of transparency that consumers feel more connected to their food that way.
Yes. No, I think it's really important. I'm just going to read a question here that came in from Jackson Block, wanting to know about the role that the government subsidies have played in consumer influences. And then an example of PSAs when oat milk, soy milk, almond milk, and other alternatives are on the rise.
Oh, that's a tough question. I wish I had an answer for you, honestly. I do know, correct me, I believe the recent K-12 program, the SNAP program, I believe now they're allowing chocolate milk back in, but there's been some relaxation of some of the regulations that were passed under Obama. I think some of them have been, let's say, like loosened or lightened up a little bit. I think when it comes to school bids, right, bid business, those independently run, do what they want, and those that need to garner subsidies, it can't possibly, it's like magic 8-ball looking into the future to predict what might happen there. I do think diversity and variety options certainly will eventually make its way through just due to allergies and needing to have more options for young people that look, the science has gotten better, the medical testing is better, so you can, consumers, as in parents, they're much more likely to take their child to a doctor and have an assessment if they claim they have stomach problems every time they eat something. Back in the day, you were just told, well, then you just go hungry. Like that was because you were a fussy, picky eater. We're so much smarter today. So I think allergies are more coming to the scene, and obviously in public places like a school that has to get addressed at some point. Can't predict for you necessarily where and when and how. Obviously, so much of that is politically motivated or assisted. Sorry, not a great answer.
No, thank you. So we've talked a little bit about a lifestyle and choices versus diets, but what about these specific types of diets that have, we see so much about in the news, the keto, the paleo, gluten-free as a choice of a diet versus a medical need. How do those diets play into perceptions of healthful ingredients, and do you do research on those types of diets?
Yeah, actually, I should have looked into that a little bit more. We did a body of work actually for Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, and we did look at a series of diets, as well as a notion of personalization of health. So personal opinion, based on data I've seen, is that twofold. One, majority of consumers don't have as much awareness of these diets. The keto paleo diets, like, it's not to be offensive to anyone, but they are a fad or a flash in a pan, and they will come and go just like all of those Atkins and those before them, South Beach. Yes, of course, there are consumers who've had amazing success and will continue to ride that diet plan, their lifestyle, because they dropped 60 pounds, and that's amazing, right? And just living a healthier lifestyle, whatever you need to do that to live longer, rock that all day long. However, it's extremely dangerous because most consumers read about one person's perspective and one person's set of results, and now they're eating 4 avocados a day and stirring their coffee with butter, and good for you, except there's a lot of folks who will end up with kidney failure. They will end up with liver damage. Their bodies don't behave like that other individual. So where I'm placing my bet, and if this was like a stock and you could invest, I'd be investing my energy and my thoughts in personalization of health. And the notion of things like startup company Habit, right? Or if you look at Nestle Corporation in Japan, they recently acquired a DNA testing whole suite for metabolic testing, blood work, for screening certain, preconditioned, is that I think you are more likely to see, again, die with the, diet, is that it's temporary. People often fail and fail quickly and fail furiously, and therefore the idea to return to that diet, it's self-hate. It's not good, just the stress alone, probably. So I think where you'll see people going, look, if someone told me exactly how to eat for my body type, my makeup, and said, hey, your metabolism is slightly slower and you digest things at a different rate or pace, your goal should be to consume stuff like this not past 4 o'clock, and stuff like this past 8 p.m. would be better for you. You'd sleep better. I think consumers take that personalization, that lifestyle, because it's not diet and it's not focused on bans and strict rules. It's about how you optimize your personal health. More consumers can embrace that, and it's safer, I think, in the long run. Right now, we have lots of consumers where it's bubbling up, and the media is not covering a ton of it, about people who are having now very serious consequences being on the keto diet for a long period of time, and whether or not it has any kind of impact on heart murmurs. I mean, there's so little known that I think we'd be better focusing, instead of demonizing certain food groups, is figuring out how it really relates to the individual itself. Which, by the way, totally get that that's miserable if you're trying to make a packaged good or create a menu. For away from home that's not on-site, like K-12, healthcare, long-term care, and CNU, for those restaurants, still today, majority of consumers go away from home, even if it's coffee break, is to treat themselves. So they are likely to still act a bit differently, a little less stringent than when they do at home. What allows them to stick to a lifestyle is choice. So the milk is a great example. Having a series of milk offerings, even if they're charging more for them, people will pay if that is their demanded variety or need. And I think, having beyond just one lettuce type, or having more than, one type of bread offering or pasta offering, all of those create that choice and put the consumer in the driver's seat versus feeling handcuffed, like they can't go into that place, they can't go into that place. This is the only place that offers something for me, without trying to be everything to everybody. And it's a steep hill, and I completely get it. But I don't think restaurants should be running around chasing and labeling keto-friendly, paleo-friendly, South Beach, oriented, because there's too many of them, and several will fade, and brand new ones will pop up tomorrow that we can't imagine. So I think being transparent about the nutrition is probably a safest way to go, and not on the menu, but link to it. Allow someone to see the fiber content, the carbs, the sodium, the cholesterol, right? Allow them to be in the driver's seat and absorb what info they need, but not giving up on, you still need food to taste and sound amazing and craveable, or it won't be purchased.
Exactly. No matter what health benefits any dish or any food has, if it's not craveable and delicious, people aren't going to eat it. And those kinds of diets are typically not sustainable long term, where, like you're saying, choice and personal health is much more of a balance and sustainable long term. So, are there ways that you, in your research, distinguish between fads and what might be
Oh,
a
sure.
lasting trend?
hmm We uh, we have a process. Two things that we do. One is called our menu adoption cycle, and it's a four-staged curve. Inception being stage one, where things are emerging, born, and ubiquity meaning you could find it just about at any food establishment anywhere, whether that be prepared deli in the grocery store, a gas station. You could find it just about anywhere. Um, with the exception of things that are in ubiquity that have supply chain constraints that you import things like Chablis wine where there's a law that you can only import what you can import. We know it's completely at saturation. It's in ubiquity. Things in inception have a 70% death rate. So things can pop up in the inception stage and we monitor them. And it's not until they tip over with some additional scale into adoption, the second stage, where we would tell anybody to place a bet on it. We are seeing chefs now currently dabbling with highly ubiquitous platforms like a French fry or a pizza or a sandwich or a wrap, and dabbling with a funky ingredient like ghost peppers in inception. Certainly, we are not recommending that every operator should do that. It's very brand specific and consumer specific. Do you have a lot of real early adopters, adventurous eaters? Chances are they really don't, and it's a single LTO or it's a in and out. It's not a core menu item. It's not driving that kind of volume. The second thing that we do from spotting a fad versus a true trend is there are roughly 6 macro forces that apply pressure on humans, whether you're a business owner, a manager, director, right, a buyer, or whether you're a consumer. And if those forces are applying a pressure that make you change your behavior, then you know it's a long-staying trend. And so one of those examples of those forces would be technology changes, demographic shifts, the economy, policy, trade. So if something just arises and there's no reason for it to be, there's no reason to sustain it, there's no behavioral change that's going to allow it to live a decade or more, then it tends to be a very short. Unicorn anything is a fad, right? We're not going to see unicorn toast and unicorn lattes dominate our airspace in every menu doing unicorn something or other, or princess toast. That's not going to be, that's a fad. What isn't a fad, though, is what it ladders to in that bigger picture story of Instagrammable, beautiful, shocking appearance, things that look like, hey, I'm having an amazing moment, look at me. That is the bigger trend that's going on. That's just an execution, if you will, of that higher need of wanting to have little tiny moments throughout the day that you can pay homage to your personal brand, let's say. Whether you're a soccer mom or you're a chef, it wouldn't really matter. It's kind of like a, hey, I'm doing something cool, or check out this wacky thing I'm experiencing. Pretty interesting. You might want to do this too. So it has more to do with self-image and branding and personal moments than it does anything to do with rainbow colors.
Makes sense. Thank you. So, what do you see coming in the next 3 to 5 years that our listeners should keep in mind?
I think we've already really talked about quite a bit of it as it relates to health and wellness. So I think look for functional benefits to dominate in the most immediate future, and personalization because of technology and science quickly to follow that. I also think with technology's advancements, self-driving cars, for example, everybody sketched out about insurance rates by putting humans in them. But I don't think people are paying enough attention to things that can be driven around that are not human, like delivering food hot, like bringing like produce to food deserts where they just show up like the ice cream truck, but they're the produce truck and they kind of drive around. And we already see in Asia places where it's like a miniature C-store. It drives, you can thumbprint it, you can Apple Pay, you can use whatever your device is, pay, and because you've lifted it off, just like the mini bar, it knows the weight has come off, it knows what was there, and so no person and no cash is exchanged, but food being purchased that way, and just, it's like, auto vending. And I think technology has enabled and will continue to advance vending as well, and you've seen Sally the robot, you guys have seen Farmer's Fridge bringing fresh, quote, healthier and made to order that day vending items to enable those on the go who don't have a choice about carrying food with them on the road 3 days in a row, that they're able to access salads or yogurts or parfaits and things through a vending 24/7 versus places be shut down at the hotel or in a airport or at an amusement park, right? So I think you will see technology advance healthy food access over the next 3 to 5 years for sure.
Right, right. Excellent. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today that we haven't touched on already?
I can't think of anything. We've covered quite a bit of ground. I
We
would
have
love to
covered
hear
a lot.
from our folks on listening in. If anyone's brave enough, are there any questions burning for you?
Looking at our question bar there. Feel free to add any questions if you like before we wrap up here with Colleen.
It looks like that Sarah has a question that says, how has menu verbiage evolved? As in more references to health and sustainability. Off the top of my head, I don't have those stats for you, but I absolutely know holistically, we certainly have seen, and why this research was done on things like organic, natural, local, gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian, more descriptors being added to be transparent. And certainly that has continued to rise year over year, but I don't have the year top of mind for you to say exactly when we saw that take off. My estimate was it was in about the early to mid 2000s, like 04, 05, but I'm speculating. I would need to double check.
Great. And another question just came in. What is the overlap in the consumer mind for healthy and sustainable environmental products?
So I think that there is some overlap that, and this is why we called them health and wellness feel-good terms, is that, so local, right? Is that about the environment? Is that being sustainable? Is that because it tastes better because it's closer to where I purchased it? There's a chaos and a lack of ability. Literally, more than 75% of consumers cannot define for you what organic is, as just a simple example. When we ask them to, a couple of things like herbicide-free, pesticide-free, there was an inverse correlation between those items and actually the word organic, which by definition is, or by default is the definition. So there is antioxidants, for example, antibiotic-free, hormone-free, artificial flavor-free. Majority of consumers cannot define these things perfectly. They just know that they're told via the media, and I mean media as in it could be journalists, it could be a blogger, it could be a friend on social media who posts about it, it could be an author who wrote about a diet, who said these things cause cancer, whether they have backup data or not. So therefore, consumers link it to being not healthy, and I do think those sustainability terms fold into that. What we have done is look at motivators for choosing local, organic, et cetera, and GMO-free. Majority of consumers put the self first, well far and above planet and animal. So why they do the animal things tends to be because they think it's less fat in it for red meat, or they're raised better, therefore people want animal welfare, and certain people certainly say we want sustainable things, and we want the planet to do well. I think regenerative farming will actually probably displace organic in the near future as a new sustainability seal, but we have a long road of education for that. And ultimately, it comes down to them doing what they think is better for their kids. So they might buy organic or hormone-free dairy products and meats for their children because it's expensive and not feed it to themselves. And the reason they do that is because there's an assumption that all those things have stuff in it that my kids shouldn't eat. And so, and then it's like, oh yeah, well, organic's probably also better for the planet too, and that's great, but the primary is this is probably better for me and my family. And then underneath of that comes all of those other feel-good things. That's what we know kind of right now. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, and another question here. Is there any data regarding acceptance of multicultural foods versus those that feel there's too much cultural appropriation?
Oh, yeah, this is a good question. I have tons of data. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of consumer reaction. And that last statement is generated by the news. we have yet to
Mm,
see any kind of real large consumer movement who says, unless you are truly from Mexican descent, you're the only ones that are allowed to create tacos and burritos. So this
mhm.
is a very specific niche sort of like to make fire out of a flame, so to speak. Majority of consumers just love freaking tacos and are really psyched to get them anywhere they can afford them and are really okay with you. I mean, there's a great little restaurant chain that came out of Texas. If you all saw Napoleon Dynamite, Quesadillas, it's called the Dilla, and they have an entire restaurant chain, platformer quesadillas, and the quesadillas are stuffed with everything but probably authentic ingredients. And the youngest consumers, it's like, the die for late night food. Everybody's tweeting about it and posting on it, and no one's walking around going, they have no business as Texans and Americans doing quesadillas, and they're not doing it right. So we hear about it. We certainly see about it in the news, but it is not a shared consumer thing. And in
Uh-huh,
fact, we see the polar opposite of that.
uh-huh. Kind of the same with sushi too, right?
Yes.
Everybody, everywhere, everybody making it, every kind of
Right,
different
you're stuffing it
rolls.
in a
It's
burrito and no
totally,
one's getting
yeah,
upset about the fact that the
yeah.
Japanese, I mean, other than maybe some Japanese grandma who's here who's going, that is sinful. How could you eat, sushi anyway other than sashimi? And why would you put wasabi all over it, right? So, yes, of course, there's going to be some,
Exactly.
first generation that come here who grew up with the only way. And I would tell you, my own grandmother would look at me and say, you only eat this ingredient with this ingredient. What are you doing, right? And that she's offended, and she's mostly offended because it means I'm not using her recipe. It has nothing to do with whether or not hers is actually from the homeland. Which, come on. So I think most consumers today are just, look, we love to eat food and we love things that taste great, and we are willing to experiment, and we're much more willing to do it in a safe way when you put something atypical with something I'm not as comfortable with, whether that's a
Yeah,
quesadilla or taco as a format versus the ingredients that go in it. So there
right.
are certainly some very loud, tiny percents of the population who like to create a lot of ruckus, but I would try to
Mhm.
not get lost in that. Don't give up your passion for experimenting with ingredients and making great tasting food.
Yeah, because there are also always those authentic places that people can choose to go if that's what they're looking for. But like you're saying, the majority are looking for great tasting
Yeah,
food and choices within
right.
those
I mean,
areas wherever they're going on a regular
let's
basis.
be real. People who say they love Cantonese or Szechuan food, nobody wants to walk into a restaurant and see a bunch of ducks hanging from the ceiling with drainage cups underneath, right? Consumers are really, they don't really mean as authentic as they think they do, right? And so for, it's now look, I certainly would say that people might be offended if you stole someone's body of work, whether that be a restaurant or a concept, and then pulled it off as your own and said you created it. I mean, that's more fraud than that is anything to do with adulterating um,
Right.
authenticity or ethnicity of any kind, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, on that note, I think we will wrap it up here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Colleen, for joining me today and for joining our listener group, and really appreciate your time and your great insights. We appreciate the work that Datassential is doing for the industry. And again, thank you much and have a great day. And everyone, please stay on for just a moment and I'll talk briefly about our next session and our master's degree. Thanks, Colleen. Okay, so our next Food Biz Plus session is going to be Food Biz and the Art of Bringing a Product to Market. Amy Klein will be our speaker. Amy has worked in a whole variety of food companies, bringing many products to market as a chef, as a product developer, as a product marketer. Incredible expertise, currently working for a company called Before Brands, which has just launched a new product for infants to prevent food allergies in partnership with a pediatrician from Stanford University. So very excited to have Amy with us on May 16th, 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern. So please sign up and join us for that. You can sign up at the foodbusinessschool.org website. And then I would like to tell you a little bit about our master's degree in food business. This is a Master of Professional Studies in Food Business. It's a one-of-a-kind online master's degree business program with a food industry focus. So if you're someone who is looking for an MBA type master's degree, but that's specifically focused on food businesses, this is a great program. It's perfect for anyone who is an entrepreneur looking to open a restaurant or a food service business or launch a food product. Also for someone who works in a food company who is looking for a master's degree to move up within that company, and just people who want to understand the food business better. We cover everything from business financials to design thinking for food, leadership ethics, real estate, funding, marketing, operations on both the food product side and on the food service side. And this is being an online program is available from wherever you are in the country. It's designed for working professionals. You can take the program while you are working full time. Our current cohort of 21 students that started last fall all have full-time jobs, families, and are just finishing up their second semester in the program. There are also 3 in-person residencies as a part of this program that are very short, 3 to 5 days, at the CIA campuses in California and New York. So we are so excited to launch this program as something really innovative and new that the CIA is offering through the Food Business School. If you're interested, there's a direct link from the foodbusinessschool.org website to the webpage about this program specifically. So please check it out and feel free to get in touch with myself or our admissions counselor, which you'll see on the website, and we can answer any more questions for you. This is the direct link to the